everyone, I'm thrilled to have you here with me. Today is April 27, 2023, and I'd be happy to provide a quick summary of today's most important news for you. I have 4 news briefings to cover. Firstly, I will start with the news from the New York Times. 2 years ago, high inflation was about supply shortages and pricier goods. Then it was about war in Ukraine and energy. These days, services are key. Private messages sent by Tucker Carlson that had been redacted in filings showed him making highly offensive remarks that went beyond his show's comments. Prosecutors accused Jack Teixeira of trying to fecklessly cover up his actions and described a possible propensity toward violence. In parts of Khartoum, civilians endure an uneasy coexistence with fighters who are battling the regular army. We trained 6 tiny language models starting from scratch to see how they learn. The billionaire plans to compete with OpenAI, the ChatGPT developer he helped found, while calling out the potential harms of artificial intelligence. Bain & Company employees were questioned in Shanghai less than a month after Chinese police officials raided the Beijing offices of another U.S. advisory firm. Soledar, crushed in Russia's long assault on Bakhmut, was only a little town. But its salt is a national staple, and a matter of pride. Ed Sheeran is on trial, accused of borrowing from Marvin Gaye. Listen to the tracks at stake in similar lawsuits that may shape his case. Legislators voted to bar Representative Zoe Zephyr, a recently elected transgender lawmaker, from the chamber for the remainder of the legislative session. As Republicans move to limit gender transitioning treatments, barriers have emerged in Kansas, Missouri, and Tennessee. Criticism of the fascination with players' bodies and the focus on tragic family histories has the league and its broadcast partners rethinking the draft. The White House festooned the East Room with cherry blossoms, and President Yoon Suk Yeol sang Don McLean's iconic song about the day the music died. Spring is street festival season, but the city's colonial charm, world-class art and passionate cheesesteak discourse is year-round. Republicans are risking economic calamity to push their policy priorities, German Lopez writes. Can India become the next superpower? The state seemed poised to finally address its deep housing shortage. But the plans fell apart, raising fears that the state's economy could be undermined. An appeals court rejected former President Trump's emergency request, paving the way for Mike Pence to appear before a grand jury as early as this week. The House narrowly passed a bill to raise the debt ceiling while cutting spending and unraveling President Biden's agenda. The bill is doomed in the Senate. Jean Carroll, who says Donald Trump raped her, told a chilling story on the stand. The former president harangued her from outside the courtroom. Followed by the news from the media outlet Financial Times. Worst drought in 4 decades has led to crop failures, animal deaths, and left more than 4 million people in need of assistance. Passage of law will do little to break stalemate with White House. Pras Michel is the latest defendant to be found guilty in the fallout from the 1MDB scandal. Telephone call marks first conversation between presidents of China and Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion last year. Inquiry into coup attempt set stage for battle between President Lula and right-wing lawmakers. Visit comes after a series of retaliatory moves from Beijing against Western businesses. Russian leaders' attendance at a BRICS summit in August with a warrant against him would create a headache for Pretoria. Presidential frontrunner urges Taipei's last South American ally to make up for lost trading revenue. Renewable energy outstrips fossil fuel for electricity generation for the first time. Challenge to sovereignty of ex-Soviet states undermines efforts to portray Beijing as peacemaker in Ukraine. Eastern Ukrainian city occupied after 2014 invasion is now close to the front line. Demand for flavored snack expected to weaken as consumers tighten belts, say analysts. Campaign events called off after TV broadcast featuring president was interrupted by illness. Seoul is the latest U.S. ally to encounter the commercial downside of Washington's security campaigns against China. Some important and under-recognized truths about Ukraine even as Russia's war rages on. Do activists actually add value? Latest walkouts in year-long dispute risk disrupting fans traveling to Eurovision and FA Cup final. Russia's war in Ukraine has shifted Helsinki's decades-long neutrality with the focus now on NATO and foreign policy. Also in today's newsletter, Johnson & Johnson's Kenvue hit by cancer claims before IPO. Foreign Secretary cleverly says truce that has partially halted fighting is not certain to last until midnight local time. After that, I will present the BBC News. The BBC travels to far-flung Philippine islands that find themselves caught in a US-China flashpoint. Lack of ammunition is hampering Ukrainian fighters as they prepare an expected major offensive. The declaration is an attempt to show support for Seoul and counter North Korea's nuclear threat. Police say Sararat Rangsawathapurn is suspected to have poisoned at least 13 people since 2020. Amid tensions between its giant neighbors, Bhutan finds itself increasingly vulnerable. Some are asking whether a textbook's short description of China's fight against COVID is truthful. People continue to make perilous journeys to leave Sudan ahead of a fragile ceasefire ending at midnight. It's the first such trip since a deadly clash between troops on the disputed border in 2020. Turkey's president suspends election campaign events after a TV interview abruptly comes to a halt. The former Fox News host lashed out at liars in his first message since his abrupt departure. It comes as relations between Washington and Beijing have deteriorated in recent months. The £1 billion deal for Blackmores is the beer maker's latest move to diversify away from alcoholic drinks. Pras Michael is found guilty of taking money from the fugitive billionaire to influence U.S. politics. Former airman Jack Teixeira, 21, is accused of leaking dozens of classified documents. And finally, I will discuss the news from the Japan Times. COVID tracker, Tokyo reports 1,663 new cases as uptrend continues. 2025 World Expo in Osaka ticket prices may see over 30% hike. Slain Japanese journalists' last Myanmar images shared 15 years after death. Japan plans to end COVID-19 border controls on Saturday. EU Commissioner says Japan's gender equality decades behind Europe. COVID-19 tracker. Tokyo logs 1,745 new coronavirus cases. Scientists show how climate change affected East Africa's drought. U.S. House Republicans pass debt ceiling hike, hoping to spur Biden to talks. Jobless young Chinese seek solace in temples and tale of failed scholar. Lessons emerge as scientists unravel a new understanding of sleep. Singapore hangs prisoner over 1 kilogram of cannabis. Ron DeSantis showdown with Disney carries political risk. ANA bounces back from COVID with first annual profit since 2020. Toyota hits record annual sales as production recovers. Japan sets 30% target for female executives at big firms by 2030. Why flying is so expensive and likely to remain that way. Beer brewer Kirin strikes $1.2 billion deal for Australia's Blackmores vitamins. Nomura profit falls for third straight year under CEO Kentaro Okuda. That's a wrap for today's international news highlights. Hope you all got the lowdown on what's happening around the world and that your listening skills have reached new heights. Catch you all tomorrow. See you.